this lesson, we are going to talk about some frameworks that we can use to learn how to give feedback effectively and the importance of feedback overall. Now, feedback is so personal and unique that you would need to keep evolving your framework. You will learn that the feedback you may give to one person is completely different to the feedback you share with someone else. So, feedback is so personal and so unique that you need to keep evolving it. And we have talked about the buddy pattern in the anti patterns lesson. And you want to be liked and loved so badly that you will never give a single piece of negative feedback. And we talked about this as the buddy pattern in the anti patterns lesson of engineering leadership. You want to be liked, we want to be loved because we are humans after all. And we never want to do the hard things of giving feedback. But this behavior is not going to create any positive team culture. In fact, it's going to do the opposite of that. You're going to slow down your learning, you're going to slow down your team because you're in danger, because this might lead to more potential behavior, which might be worse for your team. You really need to make sure that you give feedback. And feedback is the best gift you can give it to someone. Most leaders are scared to give feedback because they think that their colleague might not take them in the right way. The colleague might get defensive, get mad at you for sharing feedback, but it is the best gift you can give it to someone. Negative feedback is difficult. You may find excuses to not do it or postpone it, but keep this in mind that if you're not sharing this feedback, you give them zero chance of improvement, and that is not fair to them. So giving negative feedback is extremely important. And the problem is never the person themselves, it's the behavior that they're exhibiting. And if you know this about feedback, that it's not the person, it's not personal, it's the behavior that we need to rectify, suddenly a lot of things change when you're giving feedback. And if we want to, and if we combine that with our initial fight or flight response, then it gets worse. We are likely to experience a social threat when facing people of higher status, feeling or sense of uncertainty, or feeling disconnected, which is something that is unfair. Now, if you combine that with like fight or flight response, it's no wonder feedback is not part of our high priority list because whenever we receive feedback, we get really defensive. And that's not what we want, but that's what happens. And that's why feedback is difficult to receive and to give. But one hot tip is that you don't give feedback or take any action that will impact others if you don't have the time to address the feedback or if you don't have time to listen to their story. That is, if you're in a rush. Because if you're in a rush to give someone the feedback, it's a sign that you have failed them before you even got started with them. It's best to hold off until you have something concrete or positive to say and have more something constructive to say. Because when you're feeling like you have to give someone feedback and you cannot wait until tomorrow, it's a sign that maybe there's a problem with you are insecure or something that has gone wrong with you, or they had a really massive impact on you with the behavior that they exhibited. So make sure that you take the time, take the day off, don't stress too much, and after you give it some time, collect your thoughts and give them feedback. And reflect when you felt grateful after receiving feedback. So think of a time when someone gave you feedback that actually made you feel good, even though it was constructive feedback. How did they convey their message? Why did you value that feedback? How did that make you feel? Think of that as you start to craft and learn to give feedback more frequently to your team. And we have a framework. This is one of my favorite frameworks to use, which is SBI Framework with the twist. Now we can divide this framework into three parts: situation, behavior impact, and outcomes. Now, situation, as in, what was the situation that happened where you felt the need to give feedback? What was the situation like? Were you in meetings? Did someone say something? What was the situation? What is the behavior that you would like to change? What behavior impacted the team or impacted you or someone else on your team? You want to be very careful of that. For example, if they're interrupting in meetings, then you need them not to do that. So let them know that the behavior needs to change, where they need to stop interrupting others and make others feel excluded. And impact is that your other team members felt excluded, and that is the impact from their behavior, right? And the situation was that you were in a team meeting discussing ideas and thoughts, and someone came off really strongly, and kept interrupting everyone else in the meeting. That's not how you want, right? And that's the essence of SBI framework. But I like to add a twist and say, let's also focus on the outcome, because then that helps you with feedback in general. What is the outcome you would like from that conversation when you're giving feedback? Is the outcome that you would want their behavior to change? You don't want them to interrupt others in the meeting? Then let them know that. So the outcome here, it's not just you and me, right? Let's try to figure out what is that behavior that we need to change, because it's not them, it's the behavior, right? And you can also use this infographic here to use SBI framework with the twist so that you can easily reference it in the future when you're giving feedback. So let's say you have a situation. Let's take a look at an example. You have a team member that is very senior in the org and is not mentoring junior devs and not really prioritizing them. What is something that you need to do? Well, your first instinct is going to be that this is not okay. This, in this case, would be that you would want this behavior to stop or change, and that's going to be your first instinct. But the second is going to be that they are mean and they're rude, that they're constantly talking over people. This is not making the team feel good, and the team is not speaking up because of that. And that is the impact. So let's try giving this feedback using this framework. And these are the list of questions that I have in the workbook that you can use to craft this specific feedback. That is, what is the outcome? What is the context? What is the situation? What behavior needs to change? Why do you think this happened? And what was the impact that it had on the team? You can use these questions to craft a really good feedback message. So, workbook time. You want to collectively craft a feedback message using a SBI model with a twist, and make sure that you give it a shot. So, what are some important things to note about feedback, right? You always want to be open to hearing their side of the story, their feedback, right? Because as much as you are open to sharing yours, they also have a side to it, which is very important. So, maybe you don't have context to new things that could have happened, that maybe they did not let anyone else talk because you were in a client meeting and you knew a backstory which would significantly impact the project. There could be many different reasons, and then suddenly you start feeling like, oh, that's why they kept interrupting others. And even though that's not okay and they should never do that, there's a better way to handle it, and feedback can change based on that. And lastly, document the action items. What are the takeaways for them? And ask them what the action items were from this, so that you can make sure that there's alignment. The answers should always align to what you talked about, but it shouldn't be perfect, but it should have the essence of what you are looking for. So again, make sure you use the specific framework and follow the workbook exercise for it. All right. I hope you have a good one. Bye for now.